Hello, everybody. We are back here again. It's a very special Summit Extra today. Unfortunately, our speaker Ketaki Kapoor was not able to talk last week. Because of all the rains in Mumbai, but she has come back this week for a special one-time only webinar presentation, and I'm so excited to introduce her. Before I do that, I am going to just quickly remind you about the organization that's sponsoring this event, Consilience Learning and the Learning Analytics Collaborative. So if you're not already aware, my name is Emma Burns. I am the Professional Learning Coordinator at Consilience, and the Learning Analytics Collaborative is a platform and a service for schools that wish to use learning analytics to improve and to transform. So we help to collect your data. We work with you to present that data as information, and then we help the users at your school to gain insight. We share protocols and data conversation tools to gain insight about your learners so that the data can make an impact in your school. We have over 100 pre-built visualizations in our platform, and every one of them has been customized to answer the specific questions that schools have. We have data dashboards for teachers that want to see different assessments in one place for the students in their class. We have dashboards for specialists who want to understand the impact of their interventions. We have dashboards for administrators and board level to see the high-level aggregate data. And we have dashboards for students and parents who want to understand their individual students' learning trajectory over time. We've got over 50 schools in our collaborative from all over the world, and we're all about sharing the learning. So one school develops a use case or a new protocol, and we share that information with other schools, just like we're doing right now with our special addition to our virtual summit. I'm delighted to introduce our last speaker for the summit, Ketaki Kapoor. She is the Deputy Head of Primary at Oberoi International School. And she's going to be talking about how data-informed learning and teaching can help us to work smarter, not harder. So I'm really excited to learn from Ketaki. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma, for the warm welcome. I will be sharing my screen now. Just allow me some time. Do you see what I see?
I see what you see.
Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and a warm welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to start by apologizing for the inconvenience caused by the power outage, which led us to reschedule the original session. So thank you so much for your patience and for making the time to join us today. So for those watching the recording later, I truly appreciate your efforts and I hope you find the session valuable. I'm absolutely thrilled to be presenting to a diverse group of educators, leaders, professionals from around the world, all coming together with a shared goal of enhancing learning and teaching. In the next 30 minutes that we have together, I hope to be more than just a presenter. I aim to be a data storyteller, guiding you through how the intelligent use of data can transform our classrooms, our students, and perhaps even our own practices. So my goal is very simple. I want to leave you with one actionable item that you can take back to your context, something that sparks reflection, perhaps shifts your mindset, and maybe inspires you to approach your work a little differently. So whether it's how you change your thinking, your feeling, or probably even your action, that's what I hope for today. So let's dive in and explore how data can lead us to a meaningful, impactful change. Now, while planning this session, I came across a story in Dr. Selina Fisk's book, Data Informed Learners, that really resonated with me, and I'd like to share that with you. So in the mid-1800s, during a cholera outbreak in London, most people believed the disease spread through bad air. But there was one physician, Dr. John Snow, who had a very different theory. He believed that cholera wasn't airborne, but was transmitted through contaminated water. Let's see what happened next. Dr. Snow, he didn't rely on assumptions. Instead, he took action based on evidence. He meticulously tracked the locations of cholera cases, mapping them across the community. His analysis led him to identify the Broad Street water pump as the source of the infection, proving that cholera was in fact a waterborne disease. So, John Snow's mission to uncover the source of infection can be seen as building a solution piece by piece, much like assembling a Lego model. He started with an initial hypothesis, the first piece, and then he began sorting through the data, collecting information about those affected by the disease. Now, each new piece of data was carefully examined. And they were carefully arranged, revealing trends that fit together to form a clear picture of the outbreak. Snow then presented the data visually, much like laying out the pieces of a Lego set, showing the concentration of cases around a single water pump, right? Now, finally, he explained the story in a way that made the problem undeniable. The result was actionable. Immediate steps were taken to remove the pump handle, saving lives in London and influencing the public health globally. Just like assembling the Lego pieces leads to a completed model, Snow's approach builds a data-informed solution that had a lasting impact. So as we go through today's session, I invite you to think about the same principle, using evidence to inform decisions and taking action that truly make a difference in our classrooms and schools. Let's look at the next one. Let's now turn our attention to a powerful framework from Dr. Selina Fisk's action and evidence model. Now, this quadrant here, it helps us interact as educators and leaders to see how we interact with data, how we use it for our decision-making and actions. The way you see this model, it has been divided into 4 quadrants, each representing a balance between the use of evidence and the level of action we take. So as you explore the model, you will notice that you can be positioned in any of the quadrants on also how much you're relying on decisions and actions based on the data that you have. You may find yourselves, shifting across the quadrants, left, right, top, bottom, depending on the challenges or situations that you face. So this movement that you see is pretty natural. It shows how, you have an evolving relationship with evidence and action. But the key here is really balance and using it to inform meaningful, impactful action. I'd like to take a moment and moment for you to reflect on where you currently stand. What is your approach to data and decision making? And do you tend to take action without relying heavily on data, or do you find yourself gathering lots of data, perhaps, but not acting on it? If you were online, I would have loved for you to actually share your thoughts or feel comfortable even on unmuting, but I know I may have some participants, maybe not. So this is what I would want you to do. Just think about where you are currently in the quadrant. And sorry, Emma, were you saying something?
Oh, I was just reflecting on it for myself, Ketki, and I was thinking that absolutely, like we always aspire to be in that top right quadrant, right? That evidence and action making an impact quadrant. But I know as much, like I empathize with a feeling that I'm sure everybody has, where this idea that that does take a lot of work and a lot of energy. And so I think when I feel overwhelmed, I quickly move into taking action without the evidence and the guesswork quadrant. I'm still working, but I'm like spinning my wheels sometimes, I think I would say.
And I think it's interesting in terms of how for different situations, I could see myself fall under different quadrant. And I'm sure, the others would resonate with that too. But that being said, a lot of us do not really fall in the status quadrant because there's a lot of evidence out there for a lot of schools, right? it's just more in terms of what do you do with it, unless you really choose to not do anything about the data and the evidence that you have. So let's explore together how might this model be something that we can work towards using data more effectively and more so to bring about real actionable change. I've got a persona right here in front of you. And as we look at this persona, it's also like a teacher that you may resonate with again and see in terms of where she falls within this quadrant and why. Right? So here we have Miss Lollipop McGiggles. She's someone who's introduced guided reading in her classroom. She's heard such amazing things about how to get started, but she doesn't really know in terms of where her students are when it comes to their reading levels. And that being realized, I mean, it's interesting where most of us again would be like her in her position, but yet again, just like what Emma said earlier as well, what quadrant does she fit under? And a lot of it, I'm sure you would also say that it would be guesswork because she's taken action, she's got guided reading going, but she really doesn't know the levels of the students in terms of where they are. So right now it's a lot of guesswork in terms of what if I give them this book? What about probably in terms of areas or strategies that they need to be working on? But do the students really need that, right? That being said, let's just look at another persona that we have right here. So she's again a teacher that we have right here who has probably been in the teaching field for more than 10 years now. But according to her, not much has changed when it kind of comes to reading instruction. It's probably the same methods that have been used in her school for years, the same, weekly spelling drills, reading comprehension, and some group reading activities. It's what we have always done and something that they say that they're always comfortable with. So again, when you are looking at this quadrant, see where she fits under. Would that be guesswork? Would that be status, lost opportunity, or impact? And looking at this, and I know we don't really have much of an interaction that's happening right here, but I know for a fact that you would have placed her under lost opportunity because despite the fact that she's got a wealth of evidence, there is inaction. And many a times, there are teachers, teams, and schools who might find themselves in the lost opportunity quadrant. They have access to a lot of valuable data, but they don't always take action on it, right? And there could be several reasons of why that could be the case. Maybe the educators don't really understand what they're supposed to do with the data that they have in hand. The others might probably feel unsure about the fact on how to use it effectively. Some may want to try, but they really lack the resources and support to implement those changes. And sometimes I think there's this fear of making a mistake and getting it wrong. Now, all scenarios that I've shared, they're very common, but that's okay, right? We all have faced this sometime or the other. But the whole aspect now, and I think Emma, you said that earlier as well, was how is it that we move to the top right quadrant, which is how do we move towards making an impact? So imagine a classroom or a school where every instructional decision that a teacher took was backed by real, actionable data. What would it be? What would the classroom look like? But the main question I'm sure that most of you have is how do we make it happen? And how do we work smarter and not harder? And this is where I really want to bring your attention to this model, which is data literacy. And a lot of us collect a lot of data, but it's also what do I do with the data? How well do I understand the data? How well do I interpret the data? And how well do I use it to make meaningful decisions? And with this, I want to take you back to the Lego sort analogy, which I shared earlier. On its own, it may seem very insignificant, but when we sort and we organize the blocks, we can really make something meaningful. And this is where I want to bring your attention to another model, which is of a data storytelling approach, right? What is it that you do with the data? How is it that you kind of transform it into a narrative? And how is it that you use that to make it into a direct positive impact? I know I've been doing a lot of talking at this point in time, but I'm going to give you a very simple example of something that we've tried at our school when it comes to reading instruction. And how have we used, let's say, the data storytelling approach, the Lego sort, or otherwise the data literacy to take decisions? How have we worked smarter and not harder, right? So much like many teachers, Miss Fatima, whom we have here, she has a plethora of evidence to review when it comes to students' reading, learning, response, right? It's like having a box full of Lego pieces all jumbled together. She has the test scores, fluency assessments, comprehension quizzes. They are all very valuable insights that kind of give her an idea about the student's progress. But as this box of Lego, it wasn't just enough to have all of the pieces, right? The real challenge that she had was sorting and arranging them to build a clear picture of the students' learning needs. What is it that they really need at this point in time? Do I have to look at all of this data? It can be a bit overwhelming, and I'm sure that's something that we all have when it kind of comes to the data. We have a plethora of data around us. Like many of us, Miss Fatima found herself to be overwhelmed. But the whole idea here is, what is it that I am really looking for as an educator? What is it that I want to know about my students at this point in time? And I think this is where, again, it's about cutting through the noise, identifying what is essential, and zeroing into the insights that would inform her instructional strategies. Again, I bring back to the question of how is it that we work smarter and not harder, right? So let's see what happens next. When she has all of this data with her, there are a lot of questions that would kind of come to her mind, which would help her to cut the noise and to kind of really look for what is it that I want to know about my students, right? And there could be all of these questions that could be going on in terms of what do I do with all of the data that I'm buried with, right? What might be preventing these students from probably achieving fluency? Could there be, certain factors that create reading anxiety or probably lack of engagement? And how is it that I kind of work around through this? Now, this is where, when it kind of comes to the understanding stage of data literacy, it's about taking a step back as educators and asking the right questions and really prioritizing the data that you have in hand. So when I'm looking at the data literacy chart right here, right, and how this works in action, with all of the evidence that Miss Fatima had, she's now kind of gone about sorting a few of the reading samples that she had with her. Out of all of the evidences that she had, she's probably chosen a few. She's chosen a mix of, let's say, qualitative data or quantitative data. The qualitative data was more on the lines of, reading that she probably like listening to reading that the children did in classrooms, their fluency assessments, classroom observations, and in some cases, when it came to quantitative data, again, sorry, that was more around the running records or the fluency assessments that were taken. Now, in this case, I think the whole idea is triangulation being the key. You are not just banking on one piece of data, but you're also looking at all of the others and seeing how they tie together. Given the fact that in this case, she didn't really want to look at the comprehension, maybe she just wanted to focus on fluency. She's identified a few, data pieces that could give her that information related to fluency. And so when I'm looking at the fact that I've now moved on from the understanding stage to probably engaging with the reading data, who are the stakeholders from the school that should be engaged with the data that I have? Rather than just me being alone, could I be presenting the data visually to my colleagues or share it with my colleagues? Maybe start a conversation about the student performance, right? And it could be a mix of all of the different data visuals again, sorry, that I'm looking at. And I know, Emma, you kind of shared a few from your slides before. These are from the LAC platform where they have curated the data visuals. And based on all of the raw data that we had, the data visuals now kind of give you an indicator of what is it that you see. You might want to see data that is from a whole class perspective, maybe something that is very individual to a child. And this is where the data starts speaking, and you are able to kind of speak about certain elements here. The data visuals here probably kind of give you an idea of where the children are at and what are the patterns that you start seeing. And so when you're working with the teachers, you're working with the curriculum coordinators, you're working with coaches, what is it that you're really looking out for from these data pieces in front of you? What is the data telling you? And maybe this could be a data piece that the divisional heads, the curriculum coordinators, the literacy coordinators could be looking at. Again, I think this is from the LAC platform, which is kind of giving us a very macro view of the data. Just, something that maybe not the teacher, but like I said, the curriculum coordinators, the literacy coaches or the leaders could be looking at. However, they are kind of looking at it to check for wider patterns and trends. Oops. With all of the things that we've seen the teachers use data for their professional practice, how they are kind of using it in terms of planning, differentiation, pedagogy choices in the classroom. When it comes to middle leaders, it's more about how is it that we're going to be adjusting pedagogy? How are we going to build teacher capacity? How is it that we're going to help them support with resources in hand? But unfortunately, much of the discourse on the data, it only relates to teachers and it only relates to leaders working with the data. What do you think is the missing link, and who is missing in this engagement stage? And so while the importance of any of these examples cannot be argued, without involving students in the process, we are missing a key piece of the puzzle. So just like this analogy that you see right here, you can lead a horse to the water, so they say, but you can't make it drink, right? So in other words, we can provide students with all of the resources, with all of the support, with all of the interventions that you have available. But if you don't involve them in the process of understanding the data or their own learning journey, we are missing a very crucial step. So when data is used with students, it has the power to help them. Let's look in terms of how. In this case, it's about helping them build metacognition. How best do they learn, right? How are they using their own data? How are they starting to reflect on their strengths and areas of improvement? How are they seeing the patterns in their learning behavior and strategies? And how is it that they are kind of seeing themselves as learners? The second is more in terms of developing their understanding of their learning and achievement. And it's not just kind of banking on the teacher feedback, but the students can now see their own progress in concrete terms, right? They can track their own progress. They can recognize their successes. They can understand the challenges that they are facing in specific areas. The third thing is that the data that they have, it also allows the students or gives the students the ability to articulate their goals more clearly. What is it that they want to achieve based on the real evidence, based on their current performance? Tells them where they are in their current progress, what are the challenges that they are facing. It's one thing that you know that you're struggling, but it's another to pinpoint exactly where and why. And this is where data kind of comes in hand, right? Students can know exactly where they're falling behind when it kind of comes to reading, in terms of challenges that they're facing as well. And finally, the data here helps the students establish what is it that they need to improve. And it's more in terms of what actionable steps can they take towards their improvement. What is the learning that I can adjust? What are the skills that I could focus on? And those are, conversations that are very, very instrumental. Another thing, when I'm looking in terms of data, we move forward, which is the analyzing stage. And this is where you would see a lot of teachers in terms of you've got the data, you've got the stakeholders engaged in the process, but what is my next step? And this is somewhere where, again, the teachers could then be identifying, how is it that they want to approach reading instruction? Does it need to be whole class directed, small group? Does it involve individual conferencing and not all of the students? Does all of the children need to be involved in this entire process? And so basis that, the teachers could then identify sitting with the students in different groups. Their lessons could be looking very different in terms of what it is. It could be a mix of a whole class to small groups to individual conferencing. But we've got all of these things in place. The question now is, where is the action and how do you measure the impact, right? And so as we move forward to the reason stage, this is where the evidence meets action. This is where both the students and teachers are actively engaged in reflecting the data, making decisions, and they're adjusting the strategies in real time. So it's much like conferencing, one-on-one in small groups, observations that are spread across lessons. Here, the teacher could be monitoring the students, looking at the data, what is the data kind of telling her, making small adjustments, tweaks, and introducing new things accordingly. But just like the teacher, the learners here are also a part of the process. Ms. Fatima here, in this case, has been kind of working around with a certain reading instruction, maybe fluency, that's something that we were looking at. But basis that, the kids have worked on specific learning goals. What changes do I need to make? Should I practice more? Can I add another strategy to my toolkit? And this is something where it's very specific. It's really giving them the goal of what next. They could probably be seeing the action, bases the evidence and the data that it provided, and then move on from there. This is where a lot of teachers, a lot of students see the impact that it has on their learning. And so as we wrap up, I want you to reflect on everything that we've discussed, looking in terms of how is it that we can work smarter and not harder. We began with the Lego story where the data was all jumbled with the Lego pieces, each offering something to us about the students' learning. But by moving through the stages of the data literacy, be it understanding, engaging, analyzing, reasoning, we were able to sort the pieces that we had, build a narrative, and make informed, targeted decisions about the instruction, right? So where does that leave us? I think I go with the whole thing of just simply saying that think about a classroom where every instructional decision, again, was backed by actionable, real data. And in this case, you would notice that every student's voice is heard, every teachers deeply understand the students' unique skills, strengths, areas of growth. In this environment, the decisions aren't made out of gut instinct, the guesswork that we looked at earlier, but they're really informed by data that gives a clear, precise picture of what each student truly needs. And with this, I thank you all for your attention and participation today. I hope you found this session valuable and that it has provided you with practical insights to take forward. Well, learning is a continuous journey, and I'd love to stay connected with everyone. And here are my contact details. And with this, I thank you all. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Ketki. It's really refreshing to kind of think about this from the classroom teacher's perspective and think about how can all these data things, not only the teacher's perspective, but also the students. And I am realizing from what you're saying that when we work smarter, not harder, what we're really doing is putting the agency for the learning in the hands of the learners and where it belongs, as you said. And so that's really exciting, I think, for the learners and for the teachers. So thank you. I wonder if I know as a teacher, it can feel very overwhelming when you've got the big pile of Lego in front of you and you know you've got to sort it. this was a really good opportunity for teachers to see the outcomes and perhaps be motivated to trying something new. But if teachers are resistant to that, what would you recommend for school leaders to try and get teachers engaging in this kind of practice?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question that you ask. But I think we've kind of worked with teachers where when they see the results, when they see how the learners are kind of navigating the ways of working around, when they know that there are things that are working out for the children, there isn't really, and I go with the whole thing of saying that I might be planning 1,000 lessons for my children, but if they're really not having an impact on the learners, then what am I really doing?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think it's gone with the whole aspect of coaching, co-modeling, or also like in terms of a coach entering and looking for data trends, or in terms of video coaching that has really worked for the teachers to see, I may think that this was working, but I see now probably this was a lot of teacher directed talk as opposed to student talk. It could be just so many different factors, in terms of the resistance and where it comes from. For a lot of them, it's just a sense of overwhelm. There's just so much that I need to be doing. And do I need to do one more thing? Do I need to add one more thing to my day, to my
Yeah.
everyday routine?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about conversations. It's about just seeing the impact. I think data, in this case, the data visuals really help.
Mm.
Comparison of data, and I think LAC platform has been super instrumental for us as well, because we've looked at the past data, we've looked at the recent data, and then it's more in terms of what is it that you notice, what is it that it's telling you, and we
Mm-hmm.
the more the teachers engage with the data, the more it's kind of giving them, like a eureka moment of what
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
and
Something
yeah,
that we tried in one of my previous schools as well was being like, okay, we can see this trend and we know there's so many factors that can go into that trend, but what's actually something in my control that I can, what's an intervention I can make in my sphere of control in my classroom to have an impact on this data piece. Yeah. It's a tricky one, I think, trying to change people's perceptions, as you said. But I think yeah, this webinar certainly like shows the impact of teaching and learning in this way. So thank you.
thank you so much.